Thank you for joining today's DoD Environmental Planning and Conservation webinar series presentation. Today's session is titled A Lakota Winyan Journey. Today's presenter is Jacqueline Melcher, Chief of the Installation Management Division, 88 Civil Engineer Group, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. As a reminder, today's presentation will be recorded and then posted on the Cultural Resources DENIX website under the News and Outreach tab. Before we get started, please take a moment to make sure your phones and web browsers are on mute. With that, I will turn it over to Jacqueline.
Wash Day, team and family, DoD family and others. I'm Jacqueline Melcher, Oglala Sioux Tribe, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to be here today to speak to all of you about my journey to the Department of the Air Force. Next slide. So you may wonder where I'm from. Well, my ancestral lands are displayed here on the screen, and that is the Great Sioux Nation prior to the Relocation Act and the consolidation of tribes onto smaller land masses known as reservations. I was born and raised on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which is in the lower southwestern corner of South Dakota. Next slide. These are some of my ancestors. You know, we have a line of ancestors and lineage that I'm fortunate enough to have pictures of that are several, over 100 years old. The left slides are my two great-grandmothers, Yellow Elk Woman on the far left and Jenny Tibbs on the right. Jenny is the daughter of Yellow Elk Woman, and those two beautiful women were part of Wild Bill's Western show, where you could see real live Indians during the Western show, and they were able to, show their cultural regalia and talk about if they could speak English, talk about their cultural heritage, being Lakota Sioux women. The picture on the right is actually my great-great-grandfather, Jack LaPointe, and of course, Jenny Tibbs, who now is Jenny LaPointe because she married my great-grandfather. Next slide. And then I'd like to talk about my Chioshpe, my Akitita. Akitita is Lakota word for warrior. And these are my warriors from my family. I don't have in this picture, unfortunately, two of my great uncles who were part of the Battle of Greasy Grass, or some of you know it as the Battle of Little Bighorn. Just like in the Civil War, my family had members on each side of the conflict. One was Custer's Scout, and the other was Crazy Horse's Blotahunka, which is the Lakota word for lead warrior. So, but the pictures I do have, the far left is my paternal grandfather. He was a naval aviator in World War II. He was at the Pearl Harbor when it was attacked by the Japanese to start the war. He survived the attack and went on to serve over 20 years in the Navy as an aviator, and the picture you see there was taken after his 200th landing on the USS Roosevelt in the Pacific Theater. The middle picture, let's talk about my maternal grandfather, Marine Raider Eugene B. Rooks. He's also a residential boarding school survivor, and I'm sure a lot of you on this webinar today know what that means, and I'll tell you Eugene's story. At age 5, Eugene was taken from the reservation to a boarding school hundreds of miles away. Now, if you think back then, my great-grandmother could not speak English. All she spoke was Lakota. And so Eugene was taken away, and my grandmother did not know when she'd ever see him again, if she would ever see him again. And she did not speak English. She did not have FaceTime, did not have Skype in order to inquire about her son and where he was taken to. And so they cut off my grandfather's hair, and he could not speak Lakota. And the mantra back then during the boarding schools were to kill the Indian and save the man. That was an attempt to civilize Native Americans and to assimilate them to Western culture. So my grandfather at age 5 who was so traumatized by that event, he ended up going mute for over 2 years. So they sent him back to the reservation to be with his family. At age 17, Eugene went on to hop a coal train to Casper, Wyoming, to enlist in the Marine Corps to fight in World War II. And the picture you see here was when they found a Japanese honor flag by one of the Japanese soldiers. And Eugene was actually on the USS Missouri to witness the surrender of Japan in Tokyo Bay at the end of the war. So my first grandfather saw the beginning of the war. My second grandfather saw the end of the war. And then, of course, the far right is my mother, a Vietnam vet, Deborah J. Rooks, also a residential boarding school survivor. And that's where my story begins. Next slide. So my mother married my father, Henry F. Dement Jr. They met in the Marine Corps. And after they got out of the Marine Corps, they moved back to South Dakota. My father got a job with the Northern Pacific Railroad in Nebraska. So my mother went to the ranch on the reservation in Oglala, South Dakota. My mother was 9 months pregnant, full term, with twins. And her water broke on Christmas Eve in 1978. Yes, I'm dating myself, so just bear with me. But her water broke Christmas Eve. And she went to the Indian Hospital in Pine Ridge. And the nurses, it was Christmas Eve, so the nurses called the doctor, who was actually living about 90 miles away in Rapid City, South Dakota. He was a Caucasian doctor, non-native. And they called the doctor and said that Miss Dement was in labor, full term with twins, and her water had broken. And the doctor responded by saying, "I will not come to the reservation on Christmas Eve to deliver Indian babies. Send her home with a birthing kit." So the nurses sent her home. And we were eventually delivered on January 4th via C-section. My mother was given her last rites, and she barely survived that experience. And I've never told that story until about 2 years ago, because I was too ashamed and embarrassed that because of my Native American background, culture, upbringing, I wasn't even given enough respect or dignity to be delivered by a doctor. Or my mother, who was a Vietnam veteran, was not given enough respect or dignity to be cared for by a doctor to deliver her daughters. But obviously we survived. And in the picture here, you can see I'm in the middle, and my chekpa, which is Lakota word for twin, is to my right. And then the other young woman is my older sister, Rachel. And that was us in a picture that we took before I went to a powwow. Well, yes, I used to fancy dance back in the day with my little blonde hair and braids. Next slide. So the journey on the reservation as a girl growing up was not always easy. And we frequently had no running water. Sewer infrastructure was not the best, nor were the roadway systems. And I think because of all that and the hardships that we endured on the reservation, I had a strong desire to become a civil engineer. And so I made my way to college and went to School of Mines as a single mother. And I got my degree in 2011. You can see there is my older son, Cadence. He's 21 now. He and I at School of Mines, as I got my degree, and I think my son actually has a minor in engineering because he was at so many classes with me. Next slide. It wasn't easy, but I graduated. I think I was on the 5-year plan because I worked and also went to school. I worked for engineering firms as a drafter during my time at School of Mines. And then at the end of my journey, I was gifted an eagle plume for the feathering ceremony, which is an honoring tradition that Native Americans can receive for different events in their life. And as you can see in the far right, I was very proud to have that eagle plume hanging off my graduation cap. And I'll never forget, as I walked away from the stage, there was an elderly Lakota man in the audience, and he grabbed my arm and said, "Daughter, I am so proud of you for wearing that eagle feather in your hair." And it made me so proud that one of my elders were able to acknowledge and see that I was going to be proud of who I was and where I came from, and for the accomplishments that I'd done in my life so far. Next slide. So after I got out of college, I went on an engineering journey to North Dakota, where it's colder than South Dakota, if you can believe that. I spent a couple years in private sector. I spent a short stint with the DOT, and I really cut my teeth as assistant city engineer for City of Minot for 4 years until I met my husband, who, as most military guys do, take women away from where they grew up, and left North Dakota to go to Japan, then to South Carolina. And that's when my career started with the Air Force. However, I've got cool pictures first. Next slide, please. So this is one of my favorite pictures from my young engineering journey. Is I was fortunate enough to help design and then oversee construction of a 1 million gallon elevated water tower for City of Minot to serve an industrial park with fire suppression capabilities. And so the left was it constructed, and the right was me up on top of the pedestal, on top of the tank on a Sunday before a big concrete pour for the ring beam. And I was on top of the world, literally, in North Dakota at that time as a young engineer, and very excited, obviously, to have that opportunity. Next slide. And then, of course, my journey led me to the Department of the Air Force. And my first job as a civil engineer project manager for the Air Mobility Command at Joint Base Charleston, where we do everything, air, rail, sea, and road. And I loved that job. I was able to learn the Air Force mission, provide, Department of Defense resources and critical infrastructure to ensure our country stays safe. Next slide. And then my journey, like a river, took a pretty sharp turn, and I was given an opportunity to merge my engineering, Lakota, construction, and tribal knowledge background into one like a unicorn, opportunity. The Department of the Air Force, like all federal agencies, especially DoD, have to ensure federal trust responsibilities are adhered to when they do construction projects or any kind of land transaction or any kind of areas will be affected by federal activities. And so the Department of the Air Force has they call it a DAFI, a Department of the Air Force instruction, that is called Interaction with Federally Recognized Tribes. And at Joint Base Charleston, that responsibility fell in my wheelhouse when I got promoted to the Installation Management Division Chief. And so I served as the Installation Tribal Liaison Officer for that activity. During that time, there was I won't be a teaser alert. There's a video coming up soon, so I won't spill the beans. But if you have been to the Pentagon, there is a star quilt that we found in the Pentagon hallway that was gifted to the Air Force by the Great Sioux Nation back in 2002 to thank them for a project where the Air Force was providing surplus housing units to reservations to provide housing for Native Americans. And so, left picture, my first ever visit to the Pentagon, I was pretty excited. I felt like I was on top of the world again. And then the right picture with a bunch of key senior leaders, and in the middle is Alicia Sylvester. If she's on the line, shout out to Miss Sylvester, a friend of mine, Lakota, or a Native American woman who does great work for the DoD. And I was excited to meet her that day and share a picture with her in front of the star quilt. Next slide. Again, continue to do change to merge my cultural background, my education, so that we can educate and provide awareness to our force. Pictures here of me doing a ceremony with the newly inducted Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force to help them understand what that chief symbology they use actually means, so they can use it respectfully and with dignity, so that they do not misrepresent or marginalize Native Americans with that symbology. Picture on the right is my Navajo brother, Sergeant Daryl Charlie. Amazing individual, growing his hair long. Again, spoiler alert. Love that individual. I've grown so much by knowing him, learning his culture, and being able to, work with him as we move forward in protecting and advocating for Native Americans in the Department of the Air Force. Next slide. Those of you that have been on or around Native American reservations, you probably heard the word INET. It stands for Isn't That Right? Well, INET was established, and I'll let the video play, then we'll talk more about it. But without further ado, Daniel Clay, please roll that beautiful bean footage and play that video. Next slide. If we want to be good leaders, we have to care about our people. You can't care about your people unless you know who they are. 2 years ago, Colonel Adams, who's now General Adams, was our base commander. We had a diversity day at the chapel. I just was loud and proud about who I was and where I came from. And General Adams remembered that. So fast forward 2 years later, he is now at the Pentagon, and the Department of the Air Force has established the Bear Analysis Working Groups. And he was the champion for the Native American group. And he asked me if I would be part of that team and be the lead for that. I, of course, said yes, because now we have an opportunity to identify barriers and affect policy that inhibit Native Americans from being fully successful in the DAF. INET is the Indigenous Nations Equality Team, led by General Adams. It's a group of volunteers that are within the Air Force or Space Force, and we have established some lines of effort where we are trying to modify policy for several different things for Native Americans in the Air Force. Bottom line up front, hair policy for men, ability to wear regalia within the uniform during specific ceremonies and promotions, permissive TDY to go to feastings and ceremonies before and after deployments, as well as we're in conversations with Chief Bass about the use of the Chief Master Sergeant logo and how we can represent and be respectful of Indigenous peoples.
I think cultural awareness for the Native American society and the culture that they have is important for people to know. Certain tribes, for instance, they'll have an affinity for keeping their hair long. I would certainly grow my hair out and enjoy having some long traditional hair.
When I go home, I'm Lakota, I'm Cree, I'm Anin, and I'm Chippewa. I go throughout my country and I do ceremonies, I do celebrations, all these things. Right now, if I were speaking to you and I were at home, I would have my headdress on. I would be able to speak to you in that form, but since dress codes, I didn't want to get in trouble. But INET has been that bridge. They give me hope because now I'm able to connect the two.
So it's important to have these programs in the Air Force just so that we can communicate and understand each other a little bit better, be a little bit more empathetic. And as leaders, it's important to know your people. And that is a primary way that we can do that to help accomplish the mission. And also to help get them as engaged as possible in the Air Force culture.
So we never even had a voice until now. Now we have this voice at the Pentagon to advocate for and try to modify policy or initiatives for Native Americans, which I think is huge. If we didn't have diversity in our force, we would be stagnant. It's new ideas from different people that have different perspectives that can help us be a better force overall. So yeah, I think the video can say it a heck of a lot more eloquently than I can. But yes, INET is now a thing, and this is our leadership team. We General Adams, Mr. Dennis D'Angelo, the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, SES, Major Simmons, myself, Sergeant Charlie, and Sergeant Rodriguez. So Sergeant Rodriguez is the reason why we have that emblem. Her and her dad created the INET logo, and it is widely recognized now across Indian country. Next slide. Our vision and mission statements are here. I won't read them to you, but bottom line up front, we want to preserve legacy of honor, preserve traditions, and try to advocate for changing of policies and recruit amazing Indigenous members to join the Air Space Force as both civilian and military members. Next slide. We have basically 3 lines of effort to remove barriers that are policy initiatives. We've had great success with several of these. And as you see in that video, one of the members, 2 of the members actually had said, if I could grow my hair long, I absolutely would. Well, guess what? We have 10 airmen to date that are growing their hair long. And of course, their religious accommodations and their cultural identity. The newest one we have is the pre-accessions accommodations. And so what we have found is one of the biggest barriers for Indigenous males is they don't want to choose between serving their country and serving their culture. And so cutting off their hair, which a lot of you know, is very significant, and it can be grown from birth. And so they've had to choose between culture and service. And now they have the ability to grow their hair long, and we are waiting for the first member to come through as a recruit. The package is being routed to not have to cut his hair, or as his father told me, not have to lose his spirit when he joins the Department of the Air Force. And so we've had great successes. And another success we've had is we literally drafted and the policy was modified to reduce the level of approval for wearing of regalia from Pentagon half level to wing commander, which if you're a young airman who wants to wear regalia for a promotion ceremony or a, ALS graduation, then you don't want to have to send a memo up to half to do that. We were able to reduce that level of authority to a more appropriate and manageable level for the wing commander. Next slide. I talked about our successes. Well, here's some of them in picture form. They can speak 1,000 words. That's Sergeant Charlie, Sergeant Rodriguez, and Senior Airman Connor Cron. Now, you may have seen Connor Cron. He was highlighted quite a bit about a year and a half ago for getting his accommodation to grow his hair long. He's one of our first airmen to do that. As you can see now, his hair has gotten quite long, and we are so proud of him for having the courage to do that. Next slide. We also do outreach and recruitment. This is us last January at School of Mines, where we were able to deliver a scholarship to a young Native American mechanical engineering student, which we're very proud of. I was a School of Mines grad, and I was part of the Teal Spray program. And so the ability for us to go back and show our Native American, females and males that you can be an engineer in the Air Force and not wear a uniform. I like to say no uniform, no problem. You can still serve in the Air Force. And so it was great for us to go back and celebrate in that successes with the Department of the Air Force recruiting team and Snowcross team. Next slide. A lot of outreach. We went last January to Pine Ridge, my reservation. It was the first visit we'd ever had at this quantity of members. The picture on the right is myself and Colonel Lane Trosper, the Air Force Recruiting Command Vice Commander. He was with me on top of the overlook of the Badlands. So it was amazing. Next slide. As we traveled down through the reservation, we went to Lakota Technical High School. We had 75 airmen there, 75 people, the Air Force band. Students were dancing. It was a great event to showcase the different career fields eligible for members in the Air Force and Space Force. And of course, many of you guys know what that Wounded Knee Memorial is. That is the location where the massacre occurred. And one of the elders came to speak with us and explain to our Air Force members what that site meant and what happened there. And we believe it was the first time in history that we've had military members in uniform in that magnitude come to this site. And it was very emotional. It was very powerful. And it was a first step for us to move forward and work together to be a better people as we move forward. Next slide. We don't just go to South Dakota, we've got a North Dakota too. And we went to Standing Rock Reservation. We had a KC-135 flyover, mimicking an air refueling operation with the B-52. We had 2 helicopters that were there. And as you can see in the right picture, General Minahan is a 4-star general. This was his big push before he retired, was Warriors Recruiting Warriors. And we went to 4 reservations in his tenure, about over a year period. And Janet Alkire, Honorable Alkire, she's actually a former Air Force, so it was a really cool event to be there. The students loved it, and the military members loved it. It was just a great experience overall. All right, next slide. I think there's duplicate in there. I might want to just go through too. Okay. INET has not just impacted the Department of the Air Force. We have had beautiful relationship building and collaboration with other members of military branches. If you don't know who this person is, I will tell you, this is Major Patrick Sorensen. We met Major Sorensen 2 years ago at the American Indian Science Engineering Society National Conference. Major Sorensen was there representing the Army in West Point, trying to recruit members to go to West Point. And he met INET. He heard about our accommodation for hair, and he went back to West Point. He got his accommodation to grow his hair long, and he also took the first that we know of, official photo with eagle feathers and his regalia in his hair. Now, these feathers are very significant because they represent members that were under his command that he lost in battle. So Major Sorensen is a tremendous individual. He's a phenomenal leader, and he's also one of our brothers. Next slide. Because of what INET has done, we are now standing up the Joint Indigenous Collaboration Team called JICT. It's going to be utilizing the Air Force template to do a joint DoD effort to ensure that we have representation and we can remove barriers, identify barriers, remove barriers, create partnerships, do education, mentorship, etc. for all DoD, because the barriers that Native Americans have in the Air Force Space Force are not only for Air Force Space Force. They're the same barriers they have with Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, etc., and Public Health Service. Next slide. We have representation from all branches. We're looking forward to growing our team even more. And the key positions and duties are listed there. General Adams is leading the charge. Colonel Bryce is the chair. I'm the vice chair. And down the list, we have a great team of leaders and support system, and we're looking for more. You don't have to be military to be on this team. You can be DoD affiliated. I'm a civilian, and I'm on this team to help grow and care for our Indigenous people. Next slide. Here's our pillars that we have for our lines of effort. A lot of them are very similar to the INET's lines of effort. Some of them are more expanded. So we look forward to tackling these and finding solutions to these as we move forward as a JICT. We do have a draft charter in place, and we just need leadership support. And as General Adams always says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. We are now going together as a joint collaboration team to advance Indigenous representation in all branches. Next slide. With that, I am here for questions. I want to emphasize that there is no dumb question, that it's a safe space, that people can feel safe, that if they ask me a question, I will not criticize or ridicule, because we all have to learn somehow. So please feel free to chat in the chat box and ask me a question and provide your feedback about what we are doing and any blind spots we may have or gaps we may have in our awareness. So I will pause, Mr. Clay, for questions.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the Q&A portion of this presentation. Participants may use the raise hand function and wait to be called before unmuting and asking their question. Participants may also submit their questions to the chat. Looks like we have a raised hand from Jennifer Harty. Jennifer, feel free to come off mute.
Hi, Jacqueline. Great presentation. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, what are the requirements to be on the joint team, or are there requirements? Do you have to be Indigenous? Can Non-Indigenous people also participate?
Oh, Sister Hardy, I know you. Good to hear from you. So glad you're on this call today. No, some of our biggest advocates are not Native American, right? That is not a requirement. We take all people that want to educate, celebrate, advocate for Native Americans. So, Jennifer, if you work for the DoD, you can be on the JIT.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You are welcome.
We have a raised hand from Elaine. Elaine, feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. This is wonderful. I've heard your story before, and each time it's just so powerful and meaningful. And thank you for doing this great work. I do have a question about your lines of effort. Do they only apply to federally recognized tribes or to all tribal members?
Ooh, that's a great question. Can you go for JIT or for INET, Elaine?
If you have an answer for both, but in it first.
Can you scroll back a few slides? Actually, no, don't worry about it. I can look at, I have my slide deck here. Our lines of effort. So we've never been that specific, Elaine. The federal tribe requirement is a government thing that placed upon us, right? And that's one of our biggest grievances with INET is that when we have been asked to show our proof of enrollment. Well, that doesn't mean you're not Native American, because of the fact that when, the westward expansion, pushing all the tribes to, one location, during that process, the Trail of Tears, if you will, the translations and the way you could communicate lost a lot of roles, a lot of people's ancestry was lost. I have a really good friend, and I got asked this question earlier today by like 3 different people. How can I prove my lineage? Where do I start? And so we don't recognize blood quantum or enrollment status in our lines of effort for Native Americans, because it's not their fault. As a matter of fact, 1970s, the push was to get off the reservation, to leave the culture and go. They even paid for you to go to like Cleveland or Minneapolis and set up a new life, right? Sergeant Charlie talks about it in a video that we're producing for Sergeant Charlie and Sergeant Anderlich about how the whole, like, get away from reservation, forget your culture. And so we're seeing now a resurgence with our youth who want to recapture their traditions, their culture. I wish I could go on camera, Clay, because I really want to use my hands here, but we have a young female that she wanted to join the Air Force, and she had 2 tattoos on her temples. Now, this is how, until 1978, we could not practice religion as Native Americans. It was forbidden, right? That's why there's a Freedom of Religious Act. This young woman had to drive to Canada to have a tribe up there tattoo her face and do the ceremony, because none of her people on her reservation, she's Okanagan, none of her people in Washington State knew how to do it, because that ancestral knowledge and those cultural practices were forgotten. So in it, we advocate, serve, protect all Indigenous members. It is not your fault you can't prove your enrollment status. Does that answer your question, Elaine?
It does. Thank you.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat from Amanda. Amanda asks, is there a portal or contact information for getting involved or supporting? Additionally, do you have to be a federal employee or can state employees participate?
Ooh, so the charter is pretty specific for the Department of the Air Force on who can and cannot officially participate with INET activities. But we do have a Facebook page. And so, Amanda, if you want to find us on Facebook, I can't do a chat, unfortunately. I could I could put in the chat box our INET email address, but let me just say it out loud. You got this, Clay, to put in the chat box? because we have an in-at-work box that you can email questions to. And if we can't help, we can direct you in the right location. Next question.
Looks like we have a question from Jordan. Jordan, feel free to come off mute.
Okay. Jacqueline, thank you very much for your presentation. Terrific. As a veteran, a JAG officer, background in historic preservation and Native American law. It's known, although probably not widely known, that Native Americans have the greatest percentage of any ethnic group of serving in the military. Given the history of the military and Native Americans, and also the boarding schools, which were first started by the in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where that phrase, an Army officer uttered that phrase you mentioned, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Why do you think that there is such a high level of enlistment in the military? One would think it's counterintuitive. I'd just be curious on your thoughts.
Oh man, Jordan. Hey, first of all, thank you for your service. Here's why. We have always been here. We've always been in America. So we will defend our country against whoever the adversary is. Originally, it was, the Europeans. And what we're trying to do with INET and the JIT is to refocus that aggression or the bias that exists towards not within our own country, but our new adversaries like China, Russia. But my grandfather, of all people, boarding school survivor, raised in a Catholic school after he left the residential school, he wanted to go fight for his country because that's where he's always been. His ancestors have always been here. So, and you're right, highest percentage. I'll give you the actual percentage, Jordan. We serve at 18%. 1 in 5, don't judge on the math, it's almost 1 in 5. 1 in 5 Native Americans are currently serving or have served in the military.
Wow. Incredible.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Really appreciate your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome, sir. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate your comments and your questions.
We have another question from Rocco in the chat. Rocco says, great presentation. Thank you, Jacqueline. Are there INET comparable teams in the other branches?
Not that we know of. And that's kind of the push. General Adams, we were, last couple of years, we're wondering how we get other branches to kind of follow suit. And so we thought, you know what, heck with it. We'll just do an all DoD initiative. And that's why we have the JIT. Other branches, like you've seen probably in the news, we have a Marine now that has a combination grows hair long. We helped him with that. We have several Army members, some Guard members that have already gotten that without us knowing about it. So they really were the breaking the barriers. But the more that we have this media presence with social media and different, media outlets covering, and especially events like today, it further spreads the awareness, right? So I don't think there are, Rocco. Well, I don't think there are. And so that's why I'm very proud of the Department of the Air Force for forward leaning on this effort and giving us this platform and this space at the table, which we've never had before. Like, I know that my grandpa and my mom and my relatives, if they were still alive, would be so proud of what we're doing because they never had this. And the veterans that are out there that see our airmen and guardians wearing regalia and growing their hair long, they are so moved by that. It gives me goosebumps and chills. And I'm just so proud of those members that are actually taking on that right, that want to, growing the hair long. And so it's such a beautiful image. And if you see the picture of Major Sorensen, that's just, hey, if I was China, I would not look at that and say, we can go beat them. Like, that is bad ASS. He looks tough, he looks fierce, and he looks very stoic and beautiful at the same time. Who wants to mess with that guy? I don't. And he's my brother. Like, I know him. Amanda, I saw your question. I can't type in the chat box for some reason, but just email that staff MRF and I'll direct you to the JICT information. Before we run out of time, Clay, will you go to the very last slide so I can have my little favorite saying from the bottom? And I'll still take questions.
As a reminder, participants may use the raise hand function and wait to be called before unmuting and asking their question, or participants may submit their questions to the chat.
I want to say real quick, Michelle Richards talked about being guard. We have guard members. Master Sergeant Shannon Myrie is New Mexico Guard, and she's part of INET.
And if I may ask a question on my own.
Sure.
In the process of getting INET stood up, you mentioned getting group buy-in was super important. What other steps that you took did you find to be most helpful in terms of getting quick buy-in?
Oh, so we have been very deliberate and intentional about how we communicate and how we engage, because we get one chance to communicate with leaders and to potentially, hopefully, reverse that bias they have by Native Americans. And it can be very difficult sometimes to operate in that space because we have been told some pretty rude things. But what I always try to say is, like, education versus accusation. Like, I'm not going to blame people I interact with on a daily basis for what happened to my family or to me, because it's not their fault. But once we teach them, because there's so much misinformation that's been given out or that's been talked about by, Hollywood, and the textbooks aren't actually, very genuine or authentic or even historically accurate. Once the real narrative and the real story is told by people that actually own that story, like us as Native Americans, we own the story. If we can communicate that in a loving and caring way without being angry and bitter, then our audience is more receptive to our message. And so some people just don't care what we have to say, and that's okay. We'll never turn them, we'll never get buy-in from them, but the ones that do become our greatest allies. So, like I said, the messaging is the most important part in how we communicate. I see my lawyer has another comment over there.
Yeah. Sorry to be a hog on asking questions, Jacqueline. But in addition to the work, to my military background, I'm also the vice chairman of an agency called the United States Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that agency. It is a regulatory agency that protects properties that are honor eligible for the register, including sacred sites. And one of the issues that that we often deal with is trying to first, consultation with the tribes is a very important issue. Whenever there are disagreements over what kind of activity might occur on a federal installation, because there's a law that applies to this area, the National Historic Preservation Act, and making sure that the tribes are consulted properly. And also, what I run across is that oftentimes there is no understanding of how to deal properly with tribes, and it's not maybe the way that they deal with other stakeholders. And I'm wondering if in the work that you're doing and the organization that you're a member of, that you do any work to try to sensitize commanders and other individuals who have to interact, particularly in areas like NAGPRA and other laws that apply to this area, whether you've been able to sensitize them and help them learn and educate them as to how to properly conduct a consultation so that Native American issues come to the fore and are properly considered.
Yeah, that is like part of my other opportunity responsibility is so ours is the DAFI. It's an instruction for federally recognized. It's called DAFI 9-2002, interacts with federally recognized tribes. Air Force Civil Engineer Center puts on trainings on how to establish and maintain that tribal relations plan so that if you're going to do a construction project on an installation, you can properly consult with and communicate with tribes that have historical significance on your location. So at Wright Pat, we actually have some Medina burial mounds on the installation. I've worked with Project Sentinel in Global Strike Command area out there in the Dakotas to help them understand. And yes, part of that requirement is for wing commanders to learn about the tribal relations plan and policy. We are now insert ourselves into the Air Force Institute of Technology, which is they have a schoolhouse, and all civil engineering officers, other officers go through that schoolhouse. We have now started doing educational pieces at the AFIT. One of our biggest LOEs is education. And I know Elaine from doing something with Air National Guard last year. And I know, so yes, to answer your question, Jordan, yes, we absolutely. And we will also pair our Native American INET members with recruiters so that the recruiters can learn the culture before they go on reservations and, have a misstep. And we recently, a couple years ago, Navajo Nation would not let Air Force recruiters on the reservation until Sergeant Charlie and Sergeant Myrie and Sergeant Rodriguez went with them. And now we have a blessing by Navajo Nation president to go out there and recruit for our Indigenous Navajo members for the Air Force and Space Force.
Wonderful, wonderful. And listening to you, Jacqueline, I teach courses 4 or 5 times a year. In fact, we're going to be at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in June, teaching a course run by a naval organization called SECOS out of Port Hueneme. Yep. It would be terrific if we could, if you were available to be a resource person in those courses. There's a whole unit on Native American issues and laws, and it's a major part of our training. And so, how might I find out how to locate you or to share this information with you?
Jordan, if you come here, you better look me up and have coffee, because I would love to be part of that. I'm right here, Wright Pat. This is a big installation, but this is what we do. I'm at Wright Pat, by the way. That's where I currently am stationed. And if someone on this call today is going to an installation, let us know, because we might have members that could help you in your, I just got a call yesterday from an Army Reserve lady wanting to go to Reservation Nez Perce. And so I reached out to my friend, Quanah Higgins. You might know who Quanah is, name drop him right now. Quanah's amazing. She's a schoolmate of mine from School of Mines, trying to make sure we connect people with the knowledge they need, so they're not going in blind. We want to be successful as a DoD. And to be honest, my mom was tribal council. Before she passed away, she would get boxes of mail every day. And most tribal members don't know the difference between Corps of Engineers, Air Force, Space Force. They just know it's government. They just see us as the government. So we don't want an Air Force action to, wreak havoc on a USACE mission. If we can all work together, we're all one big happy DoD family. We should work together and partner with each other so we're all successful in making sure Native American rights are preserved, their cultural sites are saved and not trampled upon, and we can, do what we have to do, not because we're federally required to do it, but because we actually care. Sorry, I'm off my tangent now. Sorry, Jordan.
So no. So Jacqueline, to let you know, the course is being given in June, June 3rd through June 5th. And you'll probably still be at Wright Pat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to connect with you and have you might even want to take that course. And one of the sites now, I didn't realize that there were mounds on the grounds of Wright-Patterson. But I think that would make even a nice. I think we'd like to focus on that a bit in this course, and
Yes.
your information, your involvement would be terrific.
Can someone please put my email address in the chat for people? You can reach out to me directly too. I'm probably in the global. Are you on the global, Tanner? I don't know if we see. I don't have access to the chat for some reason.
Yeah, you know what? You can also. I'm listed in the on the website of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. It's the achp.gov, and my contact information should be there as well.
Okay, and we do have, historic properties on Right Pat because it's one of the oldest installations. Allison, thank you, Allison. Hi, Allison. Allison is my girl from AFCEC. I gave you guys a shout out, Allison. I gave you guys a shout out. Yes, we have all sorts of. Stephen Byington's my cultural resources manager. He's amazing. Architect by degree, loves history, loves architecture, loves to preserve our beautiful facilities and spaces and lands on Right Pat. So Jordan, I can't wait to meet you next year. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'd like to actually connect with you before the course so we can make sure that there's a place for you there, and get some information from the course manager, so that you might even be able to, if you have time, to be able to attend the course, or at least a part of that course that deals with Native American issues.
I would love to. Love to.
Can I just call? Who would I? Is it proper to give out your phone number on this call, or?
Yeah, here's my phone number, guys. Write it down. 701-509-2084.
Great. I'll be calling you and then connecting you with the folks that are managing this course. That would be terrific. That's great. It's meant to be, Jacqueline. One of the
Okay, if I was on camera, I would show you guys. I'm actually wearing my eagle plume and I have my eagle feather. And someone asked me last presentation about what the feathers mean. And my elders tell me I'm on a journey for a reason. The journey will take me where we're needed the most. So INA is needed. And, this is what we do, is educate and go where we're needed the most. So I'm so excited.
Jordan. Sorry, I just wanted to add to that. This is Jennifer Hardy at NAFAC. Jordan, my office is working on those class improvements, and
good.
We can send over a request that Jackie be included.
Don't you think that'd be a great idea?
100%. 100%. I've tried to bring up incorporating more Indigenous knowledge and issues, but we had to tackle the bigger issues first.
Sure.
But I agree 100%. Thanks for bringing it up.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah, I didn't pay people, by the way, to come in here and say nice things, but I do owe them coffee or lunch or something now because of it. Jennifer, Elaine, Roger, I got your back.
We got yours too.
Yeah, perfect.
I think we probably have time for one last question. If anyone wants to submit one to the chat or raise their hand.
Well, before we hang up, Jacqueline, it's Michelle Volkma. I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. So grateful for your dedication and passion and your time today. This is a wonderful presentation. So thank you so much.
Michelle, I can't thank you guys enough for reaching out. This is what we love what we do, and we want to educate. And this is really, to see so many people that I recognize on this. We're all big one happy family, right? We're all related. We're all connected. That's what we believe in my culture. We're all one big part of the Teoshbe. It's a Lakota word for family. So all part of the Teoshbe, and you'll always have a place to stay if you come to Right Pat. I'll make sure you're taken care of. So thank you guys so much. Wopila.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for sharing your insights and experiences. This concludes today's presentation. A recording of this session will be posted on the Cultural Resources Denix website under News and Outreach. Thank you again to our presenter and to everyone for joining us. And everyone have a great rest of your day.